Good afternoon and welcome to the Pitt Health Sciences Academy virtual series featuring today's topic of research in orbit. Thank you all for coming today, and we're very excited to have each of you here. My name is Kara Kasabov. I am the Executive Director of Development for Academic and Clinical Medicine at the University of Pittsburgh's Division of Philanthropic and Alumni Engagement. Today, you will hear from the McGowan Institute for Regenerative Medicine and our partners at the International Space Station. Our moderator today is Patrick Cantini and speakers Christine Kretz and Dr. Bill Wagner. Our format for today will feature a presentation and panel discussion, followed by a live Q&A session, which we all will invite you to participate in. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Patrick Cantini.
Thanks, Karen. Hello, everyone. On behalf of today's presenters and the university, I would like to thank you for joining us today and taking an hour of your time to learn more about this exciting research being conducted in space, specifically on board the International Space Station. My name is Patrick Cantini, and I'm the Strategy and Business Development Officer for the McGowan Institute for Regenerative Medicine, and will be moderating today's conversation. For those of you that are not familiar with McGowan Institute, it was launched in 2001 as a joint program between the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. Building from the success of its predecessor, the McGowan Center for Artificial Organs, the Institute focuses on three main pillars of regenerative medicine research: tissue engineering and biomaterials, cellular therapies, medical devices, and artificial organs. The Institute is comprised of a network of over 250 faculty members from 40 academic disciplines and employs over 2,000 researchers. Since its inception in 2001, McGowan faculty have filed 967 patents in the United States and 1,650 internationally. They've also had 220 patents issued in the US, have executed 205 licenses or options with corporate partners, and have spun out 33 companies. And these 33 companies have generated over 700 new jobs and over $803 million in private investment, demonstrating our true translational nature and ecosystem of the Institute. I'm really excited to bring you today's program titled Research in Orbit. You're going to hear about an exciting research program that McGowan has been managing with our colleagues from the International Space Station U.S. National Laboratory. Christine and Bill will share information about how our two organizations have strategically partnered with scientists, engineers, and clinicians from around the country and are leveraging their translational expertise to accelerate the commercialization of biotechnologies in low Earth orbit, or LEO, initially utilizing the capabilities of the ISS National Lab. At this time, I'm going to ask our facilitators to share with you a short video, and then I'll come back on and we'll introduce today's speakers.
The International Space Station is a one-of-a-kind platform capable of enabling research and technology development discoveries that are not possible on Earth. Both through the unique vantage point of the ISS orbiting some 250 miles above Earth's surface and through its constant microgravity environment, researchers are able to leverage this orbiting platform for space-based inquiries that bring value to our nation and drive a robust and sustainable market in low Earth orbit. Moreover, access to the novel space environment is available to researchers from all disciplines and backgrounds from both fundamental and applied R&D. As manager of the ISS U.S. National Laboratory, CASIS has identified life science research as a strategic area of focus, and we have sponsored hundreds of investigations within this area. Of note, the ISS National Lab has sponsored a variety of investigations focused on regenerative medicine, including stem cell research, tissue chip studies, and tissue chip engineering projects. Investigations such as these are in areas of in-space production application and may enhance drug discovery and therapeutic development for patients on Earth. For more than 20 years, humans have lived and worked continuously on the space station, and during that time, the ISS has continuously evolved to cater to the demands of the research community, ensuring that the ISS is not only a unique environment to conduct research, but also a first-class laboratory with many facilities that are similar to those found in Earth-based labs. There are dozens of research facilities on board the ISS available to the life science community, including facilities capable of supporting stem cell and tissue engineering payloads, a DNA sequencer, in-space data analysis capabilities, centrifuges, 3D printers and biofabrication facilities, rodent research and other model organism habitats, bone density monitors, plant biology facilities, and many, many more. Through the ISS National Lab, accessing the space station and leveraging space-based facilities and hardware has never been easier. Here are a few examples of life science researchers highlighting how the space station has helped advance their R&D and open new channels of inquiry.
When we put cells onto tissue chips and we send them to the space station, we're able to see the same kinds of changes that might happen to the astronauts, but on a very, very short timescale. So we can really accelerate the disease modeling using these tissue chips and then see how different drugs and therapies act on them.
We can take advantage of the ISS as a platform to study how spaceflight affects cells at a cellular level without having to do animal studies or human studies.
You have a well-controlled environment for research that you can measure all those variables and see how it affects human disease and physiology.
For years, NASA and the ISS National Lab have built demand for this unique research facility, and in coming years, we'll be focusing on areas including in-space production, biomedical research, and technology development to maximize the life science opportunities available on the space station that may provide value to our nation. I urge you to think beyond Earth's horizons when it comes to your science and technology development. The space station just might provide answers to your research questions that could unlock doors for future applied development. To learn more about the ISS National Lab, including current opportunities to leverage our nation's only laboratory in space, please visit issnationallab.org.
Well, I wonder how many of you realized how much is actually happening up on station. Quite a bit of research, and we'll get to learn more about it today. So let's get to it. Many of you have already met Christine through the video, but I'm extremely pleased to introduce Christine Kretz. She's the Vice President of Programs and Partnerships for the International Space Station U.S. National Laboratory, which is managed by CASIS. Christine's role is to identify opportunities for leveraging the facilities of the ISS to enable science and technology research that will benefit life on Earth while maximizing taxpayer investment in the ISS. Christine's team helps interested organizations determine how to best approach research on station and work through the process to accomplish the desired objectives. Prior to joining the ISS, Christine worked for IBM starting in 1998 as manager of the research division, where her responsibilities included IT security for 8 global labs. From the research division, Christine took a corporate position and was named the global operations manager for IBM Life Sciences, an emerging business area for IBM at the time. Christine has also held positions of healthcare solutions executive on the IBM Global Healthcare Industry team, as well as roles as a client executive and complex opportunity manager in healthcare life sciences. Most recently, she managed the research division, healthcare and life sciences organization. Christine holds a BFA from Carnegie Mellon University and an MBA in operations from her own Kratz Graduate School of Business, where she is a member of the Business School Alumni Board of Directors. She is also a board member of the Girl Scouts Citrus Council. Our second presenter today will be Dr. William Wagner. Bill is the director of the McGowan Institute for Regenerative Medicine, as well as a distinguished professor of surgery, chemical engineering, and bioengineering at the University of Pittsburgh. Bill serves as the scientific director of the NSF Engineering Research Center on Revolution Metallic Biomaterials and chief science officer for the Armed Forces Institute for Regenerative Medicine, both which are major research programs at the McGowan Institute and more broadly within the university. Bill holds a BS from Johns Hopkins and a PhD from the University of Texas in chemical engineering. He is the founding editor and editor-in-chief of one of the leading biomaterials journals, Acta Biomaterialia. He is past president of the American Society of Artificial Internal Organs and past chairman of the Tissue Engineering and Regenerative Medicine International Society, America's region. He is a fellow and a former vice president of the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering, and has also been elected fellow of the Biomedical Engineering Society, the International Union of Societies for Biomaterials, Science and Engineering, TERMES, and the American Heart Association. In 2006, Bill was selected to Scientific American 50, the magazine's annual list recognizing leaders in science and technology from a research, business, and policy fields. His research has generated numerous patents and patent filings and have resulted in licensed activity and the formation of 2 companies. His group's transfer of intellectual property has been recognized within the university, winning the University of Pittsburgh Innovation Awards on multiple occasions over the last 10 years. In addition, he has received numerous industry awards, including the Society for Biomaterials Clemson Award for Applied Research, the Chancellor's Distinguished Research Award from the University of Pittsburgh, and the Senior Investigator Award from Termes America. In 2017, he was inducted as a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors. In 2018, was named Inventor of the Year by the Pittsburgh Intellectual Property Law Association. More recently, Bill was promoted to the rank of Distinguished Professor, the highest recognition available to the University of Pittsburgh faculty. In 2020, he was named by Pittsburgh Business Times to its Power 100 list, and in 2021, received the Founders Award with the Society for Biomaterials. But despite all those great accolades, Bill still has a strong research interest in conducting research in the cardiovascular engineering space with projects that address medical device biocompatibility and design, biomaterial development, and tissue engineering. But before I turn the program over to Christine, I'd like to remind everyone again to please mute your audio and go dark on your video so that we do not have feedback as our speakers present their information, and also note that we will address as many questions as we can at the end of the presentations. You can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to post your questions, and we'll do our very best to get to as many of them as the time allows. So Christine, do you mind taking it over from here?
Happy to. Thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Super. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm thankful to be invited. As Patrick noted, I am a graduate of Kratz Graduate School of Business, and I love to be able to come back and talk to people at Pitt because it is a wonderful university. It's really an exciting time, as I said in the video, to be working in space. It's another version of the space race. It takes us even further than the 1960s into space. And you've probably been hearing in the news things like the Mars lander, the rover that's taking pictures already on Mars, and the race for Artemis to put men and the first woman on the moon. So there's really a surge of effort into aerospace. But nothing to me is more important than the use of the platform, the ISS, the International Space Station, that's been available to us for some 20 years. So many of the students who are in your undergrad programs haven't lived without having a space station. It's been there all of their lives. And the important thing is to use this very, very expensive lab to do the best research we can in order to advance science on Earth and to benefit the people of the planet. So we're really excited about that. You heard a little about my background, which is in healthcare from IBM. And prior to that, I actually worked at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. So healthcare is an important focus area for me personally and for my team as well. The idea of using the International Space Station to advance medical treatments and create products that may one day save people's lives and improve lives on Earth is really an exciting opportunity. To that end, a lot of our focus is in advanced materials that includes biomanufacturing, and it has become a more focused area for us over the years as we are running out of time using the International Space Station, which will eventually have to be commissioned. So it's our goal to get as many advances as possible and then transition to a new platform that will be a public-private partnership that includes NASA and other government agencies, as well as some of the organizations that you've probably heard of in the news. It's important that we establish great research that has an economy involved, a market involved, a way that the public-private partnership adds value to investors, as well as just good research that's coming out of it. So there is a market requirement that we're building so that we can find solutions and find products that will advance science here on Earth. With that, we're really excited to be working with the University of Pittsburgh and partners around the university's work in regenerative medicine. It's been a terrific almost 2 years of working together with the university to really establish some of the projects that are already started through the University of Pittsburgh and are going to the space station or have been on the space station already. So with that, I'd really like to turn it over to Dr. Wagner, who can talk to you more specifically about those projects, and then we'll come back and answer your questions. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Wagner.
Well, thanks. It's a great opportunity to be able to share some really cool things that we've been involved in over the past couple of years in working with the International Space Station National Laboratory. Let me, okay, are we still good there, Patrick? I'm having a little bit of a challenge here. I think we're okay.
Yeah, we're okay.
Okay, great. So, you think about what it is we're trying to do. We're trying to industrialize low Earth orbit. So for mankind, this is a pretty big deal. We're trying to not just go and explore, but actually set up useful, beneficial operations off the planet to benefit mankind. So how do you even begin to think about how to do that? Technically, a lot of that ability is there, but when thinking about this, it's very analogous to the decision to form a new city. Or if you're looking at why do people locate and aggregate in certain locations, on Earth. So you need investment. There needs to be innovation and growth. This is from a paper in 2013, looking at innovative cities. And saying, most locations may be a village or a small town, and then there's a breakthrough point. There's some recognition that there's a increasingly compelling reason to be in that location. And then, there's, public policy, vision, investment in infrastructure, attraction of talent, technologies, entrepreneurship, et cetera, that give you this exponential growth, the positive on top of the positive that leads to growth. So what is it that causes this breakthrough point? And then what has to happen in terms of public policy to make that a success? And these questions that cities have been asking for a while, it's really kind of the same question we're asking right now. So maybe a familiar place and maybe one that's not quite so familiar. So on the top, we've got Pittsburgh and the famous confluence of the three rivers. Why is Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh? And I think most of us will hearken back to our education and we'll say, well, back in the 17th century and the 18th century, it was a strategic point for moving west because those rivers came together. And for military reasons and economic reasons, that was an important place to be. Later on in the 20th century, with coal, with steel, raw materials, transportation, industry, again, ideally located to benefit from those things. Now let's look at something that's maybe a little less obvious. So this is the Sonoran Desert. It's in Arizona. In the 17th and most of the 18th century, no one would think that this would be a place where 3 million people would want to live. Nor would they think it'd be one of the fastest growing cities in America. Why would that happen? Well, technological advances. So irrigation, moving water to where there was no water. Transportation, allowing resources to be brought in, not over stagecoach, but over a highway system and through the air. So increased transportation. Then critically, air conditioning. I would wager that if air conditioning were to go away tomorrow, the population of Phoenix would markedly drop, particularly in the summer months. So as a result, you have one of the fastest growing locations in the country in a place that's been facilitated by technology. So in the, I'd say 1950s, it hit this tipping point where suddenly things started accelerating and people wanted to be here, and then people had to be here. So let's look at low Earth orbit and make an analogy. So low Earth orbit represents a new city opportunity. We're at a tipping point. I'm going to make that argument, and the economics are rapidly changing. So we're on the verge of something very, very big here. Again, mankind scope kind of point here. If you look on the left, this is just some spacecraft launches. And you see a general upward trend here. This only goes to 2016, but notice that the dark shaded area, that's industry. So this means that private companies are now increasingly investing. You can see this in the news with you know, your billionaire of choice having a company that's involved in space. So if Elon Musk is your favorite person, then he's your billionaire that's putting things into space. If you like Jeff Bezos, he's putting things into space. So this is rapidly growing and there's an interest. And then if you look over here, this is a track from the United Nations of the number of objects put into space. So satellites, spaceships, et cetera. And you see the market growth up until 2018. Now here's what's really interesting. I went and I plotted the last 2 years, and you can see, if you want to talk about a tipping point, there's your tipping point. Things are taking off. And the reason they're taking off is not for exploration. The reason they're taking off is because it makes sense to be there. There's economic reasons to do that. So with those economic reasons, there will be a build out of other opportunities. Case in point, if you consider this company called Axiom Space, they have a very detailed plan. I refer you to their website in the lower right corner here. A very detailed plan. They don't show the International Space Station, but to build off the International Space Station, independent space station that eventually will separate itself and become, you know, self-sustaining. What are they going to do on that space station? They're going to have tourists. They have a observatory deck. They have basically like a hotel in space, but they also have a vision for laboratories. So what are these opportunities for biomedical technology? Well, when we formed this partnership with the International Space Station National Laboratory, it was very specifically to try and map out what are the gaps? You know, where can we invest to best catalyze follow-on investment for biomedical field technology development in microgravity in low Earth orbit? You'll find that I use microgravity, low Earth orbit synonymously because microgravity is the main feature of low Earth orbit that offers some ability to leverage economically. You know, there's other things that are different, but that's the main one that we focus on. So we formed this consortium. We brought together 70 leading minds around the country that are involved in both space and regenerative medicine, biomedical technology development to really brainstorm on this. And if we go back to Axiom Space, again, if you go to their website, they see this. I mean, and they were part of our discussions as well, but they already had this up. Stem cell expansion, organoids, tissue chips, 3D bioprinting. These are biomedical applications that they see as potentially valuable in low Earth orbit, in addition to things that you might expect with super like alloy material development. Not in here is things like satellite launching and repair, space tourism, other things like that. So the most promising areas, I agree with Axiom. We agree with Axiom, our consortium. So I'm going to run through a few of these. Stem cells, organ on a chip, or also known as microphysiological systems, biomaterials and medical devices, and 3D bioprinting. So stem cells is probably quite familiar to most people now. It's certainly been put out in a number of different ways. Sometimes charlatans are now using stem cells in regenerative medicine to sell the 2021 version of snake oil, but there's reality to them and there is benefit to them. A wide array of clinical conditions have been treated or explored with stem cell therapy. Most of it is not clinically routine right now, but there are studies that are in the preclinical stage. And as we're learning more about stem cells, we're learning about which stem cells may be best for what. And in some cases where we don't actually need the cell, but little fragments of that cell may be good enough and easier to use. So in terms of vocabulary, autologous stem cells, this means that it comes from you. They're unique to you. Allogenic means they come from someone else, and it also means your body may reject those. It's going to be considered. Xenogenic means they come from an animal. Body is even more likely to reject those, and they're not as big of a deal. And then this is a big deal. This was a Nobel Prize several years ago. iPSCs, inducible pluripotent stem cells. So this is where you take a regular human cell from the skin, from the cheek. You drop in a certain number of genes, and those genes turn that cell into a pluripotent stem cell, meaning a stem cell that can turn into any type of tissue. And then that's been so powerful because you can then take those cells and turn them into your heart tissue, your liver tissue, your kidney tissue. And I'm waving my hands a bit, but that's generally, you can do that type of thing. There's a lot of details that I'm glossing over, but generally that's the concept. But there's issues with stem cells. From a manufacturing perspective, how do you isolate and separate? How do you purify? How do you expand them in number without having problems with purification and having them drift and turned into other cell types? How do you maintain them? Once you've gotten the kind of cells that you want, how do you keep them from drifting? And then if you do want to drive them to a desired cell type like heart muscle cells, how do you best do that in an efficient way? And then how do you verify it? So these are all what we'd call industrially bottlenecks in the process that need to be addressed to realize a lot of these potential benefits. So what does space have to do with that? It turns out there's a fair amount of data that shows microgravity affects stem cell behavior. How does it affect it? Well, the data suggests that stem cells stay more primordial in microgravity. They do not differentiate as readily. So in terms of purification and multiplying the stem cells, that could be a very attractive feature. They may have a tendency, if they do drift, to drift towards neurological lineages. So again, if you're interested in neurologic active stem cells, that may be an advantage to leverage. The data is not extensive. You can imagine this is how it's done on Earth. You see this 6-well plate. And this, if you think about microgravity, this would never happen, because what would happen is any motion and that liquid would separate and you'd have a floating spherical droplet or multiple spherical droplets. You'd have potentially even aerosol, which would not be good. So the whole process of cell culture is very different in microgravity, and you need specialized systems. This is one from a company called Space Tango that's designed to work and do culture medium changes and to look at these cells while they're growing. It's still a far cry from what we ultimately need. What do we ultimately need is to get the human out of the process. We need fully automated systems. We need to radically upscale this so that instead we're talking 6, 12, 36 wells, we're talking 6,000, 36,000, 10,000. We need to apply artificial intelligence so that the data we get, we can look for the relationships in the cell behavior that'll lead us to be able to act upon that. And we need far better sensing than we currently have, both visual sensing and specific protein expression, gene RNA. We need to be able to go in and really interrogate individual cells and see exactly what they're doing and then quantify that. All of this is doable. It's just a question of resources, time, and effort to make something that's fully compatible with microgravity. But once that's done, we can go through in highly parallel fashion and really nail down the question, what does microgravity do and how do we leverage it? So I've always said if I had lots of money, I won't say an amount, but if I had lots of money, I'd put it on this kind of investment. And if I was an entrepreneur, I'd try and maybe even patent some of those outcomes, because I think microgravity is pretty unique. You can't readily reproduce it in a large scale on Earth. Okay, microphysiological systems. So if you look really closely, hopefully your screen's big enough, you'll see that in these wells right here, let me get that going again. These, well, it's not, doesn't seem to be going. Let me do that again. Okay, if you look, you'll see that these are twitching. These little strips are twitching back and forth. This tissue that you see that's twitching is human cardiomyocytes, human cardiac muscle cells. And they have been derived, inducible pluripotent stem cells have been used to derive this tissue. Now on Earth, this is used all the time. There are labs throughout the country that are doing this type of work, not just with heart, with kidney, with liver, et cetera. And they're looking at various genetic diseases. They're looking at various acquired diseases, and they're studying in this very well-controlled system to try and understand what it is that's happening on a cellular level, and then can it be corrected? What happens if you put that gene back in? But it gets very personal, because you can take an individual patient and develop a micro tissue from that patient and study that disease and see functionally what's going on. So, and now with the new technology, CRISPR-Cas9, if you're familiar with it, you can potentially drop back in a gene in the future to correct that condition. So what does that have to do with microgravity in space? So that particular system that you just saw from that lab out of Johns Hopkins has gone up onto the space station to evaluate the effect of microgravity on those cardiac microtissues. This is the astronaut, and she's a physician. Her name is Dr. Serena Maria Agnon, Chancellor. She has been involved. She gave us a great talk in our symposium that we had. But she was the one who was actually, you can see, working with this tissue up there. Again, our vision in the future would be eventually to make it all automated, but right now it's very much astronaut dependent. So the opportunities are for pharmaceutical companies, for instance, to study renal disease, osteoporosis, muscle wasting, other diseases that the characteristics get expressed in these microtissues when they go into microgravity. You're probably aware of bone loss in astronauts. The same thing happens to these microtissues, muscle loss, same kinds of things. So we can study that in a much smaller, easily reproduced fashion with these microorgans. And then the pharmaceutical company can do in parallel treatments with various drugs to look at reversibility without having to do a large clinical trial. So that's one of the areas that's very close, and pharma is very much interested in investing to try and develop this further. Biomaterials and medical devices. So I threw up 3 different medical devices. Some will be very familiar to almost all of us, and some to some of us. Arterial stents, RNA vaccines, very timely, and implantable biosensors. So in each case, the material that makes up the device is very much affected by processing. The metal, the grain within that metal, the grains that form that metal have to be such that when you expand that stent, mechanically it's going to hold open and it's going to do its job throughout the life of the patient. The RNA vaccine, this nanotechnology that we're injecting ourselves with around the world in this year and coming years, that is a self-assembly process that's driven by lipids and has the potential for design on its surface. Similar technologies, if you read your business journals, you'll see that similar technologies are being developed for cancer treatment. Again, processing. And then finally here, a sensor, a biosensor, where you have some protein like an enzyme that detects an analyte and creates an electrical signal that can be measured. So glucose is the big one for diabetes that's been used, but there's many other things that could potentially be sensed that way. This is all 2021 happening right now with biomaterials advances. What's going on the space station? Well, there's a company called Lambda Vision that's working on a retinal implant. You can see it on the tip of the finger right here. Very small, a little bit bigger than a grain of rice. And that retinal implant goes on the retina, and this is what it would look like. This is the retinal implant. And then this is from the front of the eye to the back of the eye, basically taking the light, converting it into a signal that is then picked up by the cells and registers as appropriate visual stimulus. So this, which is very simplified, is actually made up of a certain type of protein that has to be deposited in the correct orientation to be able to respond when light hits it. And to make that happen, this company discovered that in microgravity, that deposition process of putting that protein down layer by layer can be done with much higher fidelity in space than it can be done on the Earth. This little box right here is they tend to have these control volumes, these control boxes on the space station. That's where those deposition studies are going on as that company moves the technology forward. So you can see the microgravity is affecting that processing that we leverage with things like stents, like vaccines, cancer therapies. All these kinds of things are susceptible to microgravity in terms of how molecules interact with each other in the absence of the buoyancy effect that's due to gravity. This slide comes from Johnson & Johnson, and it's about 3D printing in healthcare. And basically what they say is, well, we can use 3D printing to create these organoids, kind of like what you just saw with the cardiac. And we can test out pharmaceutical models and in vivo modeling, reduce animal testing. Or we can actually use tissues. We may be able to develop tissues. So Johnson & Johnson, the reason I have this slide is because they're investing in this. They're very interested in this. On the space station, there is a 3D printer. TechShot has a biofabrication facility, and this is the hardware. You see a printing chamber, tissue culturing, and then an electronics compartment. And if you look, this is a 3D printer right here. You can see the nozzles. The power of 3D printing in microgravity, maybe it's not obvious, but when you 3D print, you have a fluid that goes through that nozzle. And that fluid is a fluid. And on Earth, when a fluid hits a surface, it spreads out, right? You get a droplet that basically creates a puddle. In space, that doesn't happen. So you can work with a much weaker gel, and when you lay it down, you can maintain a conduit as you extrude it, as you would on Earth have to have a much stiffer material to do that. Or what they tend to do on Earth is they have a light that shines on every now and then to cross-link, to photo cross-link that gel to keep it stiff. You don't have to do that in space. And that could be a big advantage in working with more active biomolecules. Okay, so I'll wrap up here with some of the outcomes of our study that we're wrapping up right now with the ISSNL. And I thought this one would be of interest to those with a business background. We actually were bold enough to make projections of what we thought the markets would be. So long story in terms of how we went about that, but the key factors were we looked at the terrestrial market and the pretty well-defined terrestrial projections. And then we used expectations of what percentage of that market would be adopted in microgravity, given the advantage that it may or may not have. And we put everything together. We got this compound growth rate of about 25% for 2026 to 2035. And then if you break it up into the different segments, you see here bioprinting, cell therapy, organoids, tissue diagnostics, you can see the various growth rates. So I think, for a business focused person, the detail on this would probably be a lot more interesting, but basically what it shows is, again, this potential for growth and an increasing magnet to bring resources and investment into low Earth orbit. So with that, I will stop, and I know Christine and I will be happy to have some questions from everybody.
Thank you, Bill. Really appreciate that insight into the research that's already happening at the station and where we're going in the future. I really enjoyed the perspective of the science and the marketability, commercial potential there. It's great. And I love the analogy of building a city. It's a great analogy. He was receiving some text offline here about that, so we're going to save that and capture that on video for the future for sure. I'm going to start the conversation for this panel discussion while all of you begin to populate your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. But I'm going to broaden out the questions a little bit for Christine and Bill and ask a few. But while I'm doing that, please go ahead and post your questions in the Q&A, and then I'll turn to that here in just a couple minutes. We have about 20 minutes left in the session, so we'll get to as many as we can. So the first question I'm going to pose to both Christine and Bill is this: why McGowan for this partnership with the ISSNL? What expertise makes McGowan stand out among others for this partnership? And I'll direct that at Christine first, and then come back to Bill for follow-up.
Well, as a Pitt grad, of course, I would like to say it's self-evident why they would use the McGowan Center, but I have to tell you, they found the McGowan before I started my role at the International Space Station. So I did not make this introduction. The McGowan Center's renown is what brought the International Space Station people to you in Pittsburgh and to talk to the team there. So the University of Pittsburgh's strength and their work, and I've known the McGowan since a long time ago when I was working at IBM, but I was not responsible for this, so I can't take credit. It's just the sheer talent and the kind of publications and the kind of work that came out of there. So the team was already working with our scientists. Mark Giulianotti from our team is one, and then the partnerships that the McGowan Center already has in place. So some of the kinds of work that they do, an example is just working in robotics with Carnegie Mellon, right? So that's already a partnership that really brought a lot of value. And then we added some partners that we work with, like Axiom and some of the space type folks. But Bill, talk a little bit about the consortium and the teams of people that you were able to attract because you're the McGowan Center.
Yeah, and Bill, also, can you align your thoughts and you align why you think McGowan was such a good fit for ISSNL from our perspective too? Thanks.
Okay, yeah, got a lot to remember now. I think I think part of it has to do with our mindset. So, I always say McGowan Institute, it's easy to describe. We develop technologies that address organ and tissue failure. And we've always been very broad in attacking it and not having a bias in terms of which technology, we want to pursue. And then the other thing we say all the time is if it doesn't get to the patient, we haven't fulfilled our mission. So to get it to the patient means that we have to understand the economics and the business models and the regulatory pathway, all these non-scientific aspects that really take you from a point where you look at an idea and say, oh, scientifically, that's very cool. Great work, to saying there's no way that's manufacturable. No one's going to invest in it, and the gold standard's not going to be knocked off by it. So by having that perspective within our broader team of what does it take to get to the market, that's the same kind of skill that you need, I think, with space biology where it is right now. Because there's a lot of cool, great science, but now we're asking a different question. What of that science can be advanced, can serve as a platform for translation? And who's going to pay for it? And why are they going to pay for it? What is the market? If there's not a market, it's kind of like the city analogy. No one's going to build their house and make an investment and build a factory there if you don't have that advantage. So in terms of ISSNL, it's really been a beautiful integration of this aerospace and space flight know-how and understanding, as well as biological understanding, with our very terrestrial regenerative medicine, medical technology development. And I always say in terms of creativity, when you want to have some interesting outcomes, mix people that have very different perspectives but are good at what they do, and you get interesting outcomes, particularly when you put a problem in front of them. So it's been very, very satisfying as we've come together and bringing experts, a lot of our contacts, a lot of the contacts in the aerospace area from ISSNL to have these series of symposia that was really facilitated by COVID, because we were doing Zoom meetings, every week, multiple times a week. And originally we had planned on just getting together for a few days down at Cape Canaveral. And it worked out much better that we're able to have these really detailed discussions.
That's true. It was a happy accident of COVID to be able to spend more time in the detail.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. My next question goes to Bill. Bill, what do you see are the challenges and potential for great success in the microgravity environment?
Well, I think one of the close ones is with the microphysiological systems, or the organoids, if you will, the mini organs, and leveraging the fact that they develop disease-like characteristics, studying that phenomenon, drugging that phenomenon, seeing how to best deal with it pharmaceutically. I think there is value there for pharma to do that. And then to a certain extent, the reversibility that happens when you go from microgravity back to gravity. Why does that happen? How does the system recover? And are there lessons we can learn in that recovery that may be, translatable? I think the other is what I was saying before with stem cell characterization. We broadly, society, are perfectly capable of developing highly parallel, unmanned systems to do stem cell monitoring in microgravity, and really cranking through the experiments, if you will, to nail down this behavior and then to leverage that behavior. It's just a question of, time, and artificial intelligence and sensing continues to advance and advance and advance. So I really think that one is a gold mine.
Thanks, Bill. I'm going to do one more question because I see our Q&A is starting to get populated. So I'll ask one more question, and we'll get over to Q&A. And this one's for Christine. What kind of time frame should we expect to have the ISS or other commercial facilities being fully utilized for scientific development and manufacturing?
Well, the International Space Station is already fully utilized. So we pack up those rockets every time, and there's a contention for space to get onto the next platform. So things are lined up for many months in advance. So we don't have a shortage of researcher or use of crew time. We're really busy up there, and that's a testament to the great research that's possible. Some of the kinds of solicitations that we have open, so you can suggest research, present your proposal to do research with us. And also NASA's work, they've got a lot of work in some of the basic science areas as well. So it's a busy platform, and with more opportunities coming every day. We try to prioritize, and some of the things that the International Space Station team does is to help people figure out how best to do their project along with our implementation partners, because people like Dr. Wagner and the team who haven't worked in space before need to know how that works. How does that biofabrication facility work? How do you put things in a pipette? How does any of that work in space? Our value add is operations and science people who can work with you to tell you how to form your plan, because if you've never done it before, it sure doesn't look like your bench here in the lab here on Earth.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go out to Q&A, and I'm going to direct this first question to Christine. This is from Logan Todd. How do you see the future of biomedicine in space after the decommissioning of the ISS?
Well, that's a very good question, Logan, and thanks for asking that. Dr. Wagner mentioned Axiom is one of the groups that is putting a new space station up there. So NASA is very aware that they need to have another platform, because all of this hardware that we do with the printers and all the other stuff has to find a new home. So that's already in the works with Axiom, but they're also opening up other opportunities with other space companies. So the plan is to have a permanent facility in low Earth orbit forever. as long as we need to have research up there. And that acts as a platform then that moves on to other places like research on the moon. So it's planned to have a platform even when the space station is decommissioned, and companies like Axiom are already on the job. And we were happy that they and others, TechShot and Space Tango, participated in the symposium so they could be part of this conversation that we were having for the long haul. That was really an important part of the symposium, to have those fabricators with us.
Thank you. And this is a follow-up for Bill. With increased private companies such as SpaceX and Blue Origin transforming the space industry, is McGowan exploring additional partnerships with the private aerospace companies?
Absolutely. So with this consortium that we formed, co-leading with ISSNL, the first phase of that was to basically define what the opportunities were. What are the value propositions that microgravity and low Earth orbit offer? The second phase, which we're transitioning into right now, is to put together public-private consortia, and then to use those to fund the next stages, to help to get more input in terms of identifying what the next stages would be, but also to go to the federal government, to NASA, to NIH, to NSF, to help solicit appropriate funding to help catalyze what we think are the key strategic points that would yield the most benefit in terms of strategic return. And this is a very strategic location. I didn't specify that, but if you look at the news, or if you go to that website that I got the data for that graph from, the United Nations Office for Outer Space, I think it is, you see that the U.S. is still the major player, but China, a lot of increasing activity from China and other countries as well. And the economic aspects, this is going to be a point of economic competition. So we're very interested in helping the U.S. to maintain its leadership position, to build out that leadership position, but also where appropriate, be involved in international collaborations. But I think with the investments in space, it's natural for those companies that you mentioned and the other ones, that they would be looking for these reasons to be there, in addition to the lower hanging fruit of satellites and maybe space tourism, but to go after that to the material science, to the biomedical areas.
Yeah, that's true. There's only so many billionaires who are willing to pay for their science ride to space. So there really has to be a different kind of economy, and one that really, this is a taxpayer funded platform. And even in the public-private partnership, when the others like Axiom and so forth are involved, there's still government funding that goes to those to support their building that platform. So we need to find a good use for taxpayer dollars to bring something back to make a product that benefits people on the planet.
Thank you. So the next comments I'm going to share from William Young. It's a comment, observation of a study from back in 1968, and then a follow-up question. So I'm going to pose this to both of you. William says, congratulations, you've come a long way. In 1968, he was a study subject at the University of Pittsburgh. He spent 3 weeks horizontal in bed plus pre and post bed for 3 weeks plus pre and post data. Simulated microgravity environment in Presbyterian Hospital. Osteoporosis, venous capacity in legs, diabetes, weight changes, and constipation were all being studied. $1,500 pay and lots of rest for 5 or 6 weeks. He wants to know, did we learn anything from that?
I'm going to let Christine take that one.
It's probably before my time. Maybe those NASA guys are involved. I actually think every kind of research like that gave us a little bit more insight. And we are where we are because of small progress and little steps that brought us forward to be able to do big things now, like stem cell research, which is truly a leap forward. So thanks for your time being a test subject back in the day. We appreciate it. Hopefully, you were no worse for the wear.
I think with the Mars mission, that line of research, astronaut health, has really there's a lot more data and a lot more challenges. I know as that duration is extended, ocular changes, the physiologic changes. There's a lot more that's understood now with a lot more data, and even the twins, one going up into space and one on Earth, and looking at those differences. And there's mechanisms in place to overcome some of that, but it still remains a challenge. I would note that a lot of what I spoke about is specifically not focused on astronaut health. We're only interested in astronaut health in the context of industrial activity, like doing something in microgravity to facilitate astronaut health that would not be exploratory, but would be more economically focused. So that helps us to define and focus what we're doing. Not to say that that's not critically important. It is. It's just not what we focused on in this analysis.
Okay. Here's another question. As pricing drops for in-space research, what type of research and science will be financially possible that isn't currently viable?
I'll take that one, Patrick, because that's a good question about how things get paid for. So, for example, the research that's going up through the International Space Station and through NASA is funded, again, by taxpayers. So what I mean is that payload that goes up, the up mass and the down mass and the use of the astronaut crew time is not something that a researcher has to pay for. So if Pitt has a project, that's not a fee that you get passed through to you. That is a fee that's covered under our agreement, our contract with NASA that was granted by Congress. So for now and for the foreseeable future, what's great is that we're able to do some of this research without having to charge millions of dollars for the ticket up or the ticket down. Over time, the cost of sending things to space being cheaper will help us with the manufacture. So less about research and more about when that product becomes a product and we need to manufacture it in space, we'll need that eye chip to be something that doesn't have so much of a price tag because it costs so much to send it up and bring it down. The cost needs to come down so that the product is viable as an affordable product. So it's more about when it becomes a product.
Yeah, I think that's exactly my point with the tipping point, is that we're at an exponential, we're on an exponential curve right now, or it appears so, that the number of objects going up, the number of launches, as those increase, the cost goes down, and it does open up more. Specifically, what's the most compelling? That's kind of why we did our analysis, is to lay out things that were of economic interest, even if they may not be economically viable now. The other thing I'd say is I really believe that the future for a lot of this is going to be unmanned. So I think if it becomes compelling and it gets fairly well designed and automated, that it would make sense to have unmanned platforms that would do the activities, do the maturation of the cells, the processing of the cells. Unmanned flight comes up, unmanned flight comes back. That would reduce the cost. It would also take away sterility conditions you could ensure without having to worry about humans. It's not quite as glamorous for someone wanting to be the one pipetting, but economically, from a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense. I see that move to automation and artificial intelligence facilitating these unmanned platforms.
Thank you. Well, we're up against the hour, and I want to make sure that if there's any parting comments that Christine or Bill want to make before we sign off, before I put on our concluding remarks. Bill, Christine, anything you want to add to the conversation today? Christine, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I muted so you wouldn't have background sounds. It's been our pleasure to work with the University of Pittsburgh, and we're looking forward to our continued effort with the McGowan Center and partners that the McGowan has brought to the table with us. But there may be ideas that your listeners have outside of the biomanufacturing area. And I recommend that they go to our website. There are solicitations open where you can submit your project for other kinds of advanced materials, kinds of efforts. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can chat more. But there's a big future ahead of us, and we're really excited to be right here at the beginning of it with you.
I would just say it's been a privilege to be associated, not just with Christine, but with the team from ISSNL and all the other many individuals, that have helped to organize these sessions. What I represented is many people's efforts and thoughts, including facilitators in these discussions that we've had. And it's been a pleasure to be able to represent them, and hopefully, the audience has found it as interesting and cool as I find it.
Thank you. Well, if anyone out there has additional follow-up questions or think about it tonight or want to get in touch with us and have further on conversation, you can reach me through our website, through the McGowan website at mcgowan.pitt.edu. And I'll be happy to get back to you and answer any questions or facilitate a conversation. But on behalf of the McGowan Institute, ISSNL, Bill and Christine, I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's presentation. We are incredibly excited for this partnership and look forward to keeping all of you informed as it progresses. Additionally, we would also like to thank the Pitt Health Sciences alumni for inviting us today for this presentation. It's truly an exciting time to be a part of the University of Pittsburgh. McGowan and ISL is incredibly proud to be part of the university's longstanding tradition of innovation, science, and academic excellence. Hell to Pitt. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Patrick. And that concludes today's Pitt Health Sciences Academy virtual presentation. We thank all of you, our alumni and friends. And please note there on here is the contact information for Patrick, myself, and also my colleague, Alex Rigby, for Health Sciences Alumni Relations. We look forward to seeing you hopefully at our next presentation, which will be on May the 20th. Thanks so much for attending and have a wonderful day. Take care.